When my brother called me greedy for offering $750,000 for the family restaurant, I didn't argue. I just hung up the phone and stared at the lake behind my house, the one I bought with money they didn't know I had. They thought I was barely scraping by. A single woman in her late 40s, no husband, no kids, living in what they assumed was a modest rental somewhere across the country. They hadn't visited in years. Why would they? I was the one who left, the one who chose business school over helping Dad at the restaurant, the one who abandoned the family legacy, as my mother so delicately put it at every holiday gathering I managed to attend. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't just left to escape. I left to build something. And build I did. My name is Clara Whitmore, and for the last 23 years, I've been a ghost in my own family. Not because I wanted to be, but because that's what happens when you're the daughter who dared to want more than what was handed to you. My father opened Whitmore's Table in 1982, a small seafood restaurant in a coastal Maine town where everyone knew everyone. It was his pride, his legacy, his entire identity wrapped up in white tablecloths and lobster bisque. I grew up in that restaurant. I could shuck oysters before I could ride a bike. I knew the difference between a roux and a reduction before I understood algebra. But I also knew, deep in my bones, that I didn't want to spend my life there. I wanted to create, to expand, to see what else the world had to offer beyond our little town of 8,000 people. So I left for college, business school, then venture capital, then private equity. I built a career that would have made my father proud, if he'd ever bothered to ask about it. Instead, he called me once a year. On my birthday. The conversations lasted exactly 7 minutes, filled with updates about the restaurant, my brother Marcus's growing role as manager, my sister Diane's new position as head chef, and Mom's volunteer work at the church. He'd ask how I was doing in that polite, distant way you ask an acquaintance. I'd say fine, and we'd hang up. I stopped going home for holidays after Dad's heart attack 10 years ago. Not because I didn't care. God, I cared so much it physically hurt. But because when I flew home and spent 3 weeks helping them navigate hospital bills and insurance claims and temporary staffing, Mom pulled me aside the day before I left and said, "It's easy for you to swoop in and play hero when you don't have to live with the daily grind." I didn't have words for that, so I just stopped swooping, but I never stopped watching. I never stopped caring, and I never stopped investing. See, while my family saw me as the daughter who got away, who probably worked some corporate job and lived paycheck to paycheck in an expensive city, I'd actually built something extraordinary. I'd started my own investment firm 12 years ago, focusing on small family businesses that needed capital but wanted to maintain control. We'd take minority stakes, provide operational support, and help them scale without losing their soul. My firm, Clearwater Capital, managed over $300 million in assets. And nobody, not my family, not my old friends, nobody from my past, knew I owned it. I used a different last name professionally, kept a low profile, and never, ever mixed my two worlds. But I'd been watching Whitmore's Table for years. 3 years ago, when they needed a new kitchen overhaul but couldn't get approved for a loan, an anonymous investor came through. That was me. When Marcus wanted to expand the patio but didn't have the capital, another anonymous investor appeared. Me again. Over the last 5 years, I'd funneled over $5.2 million into that restaurant through various shell companies and investment vehicles, always structured to look like multiple small investors rather than one large one. I kept them afloat. I kept them growing. I kept Dad's dream alive while staying invisible. Then, 6 months ago, Dad died. Massive stroke. He was 71. I flew home for the funeral. Marcus barely looked at me. Diane hugged me, but it felt obligatory. Mom cried into my shoulder and said, "At least you made it this time," which felt more like an accusation than gratitude. At the reading, I learned Dad had left the restaurant split 3 ways. 40% to Marcus, 40% to Diane, 20% to Mom. I got a watch. His daily watch, the one with the scratched crystal and the leather band that smelled like his cologne. I didn't cry at the reading. I cried later, alone in my hotel room, holding that watch and wondering if he ever knew how much I loved him despite the distance. 2 months after the funeral, I learned they were struggling. The restaurant had debt I didn't know about. Personal guarantees Dad had made, loans from friends, deferred vendor payments. The kind of financial chaos that happens when someone runs a business from their gut instead of a spreadsheet. Marcus called me. For the first time in 3 years, he'd initiated contact. "Clara, I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice tight. "We're in trouble." "The restaurant?" "Dad left us in a situation. We might have to sell." My heart stopped. "Sell?" "Marcus, that restaurant is—" "I know what it is," he snapped. "But I also know we're 6 months from bankruptcy if we don't do something. There's a corporate group interested. National chain. They'd buy us out, keep the name, but—" He trailed off. "But it wouldn't be ours anymore," I finished. "No, it wouldn't." I took a breath. "What if I made you an offer?" Silence filled the line for a long moment. I could hear him breathing, could almost see him in Dad's old office at the back of the restaurant, sitting at that battered desk with the lamp that flickered. "You?" he finally said. "Clara, no offense, but do you have that kind of money?" I should have been offended. I wasn't. They had no idea who I'd become, and that was my own doing. "I have some savings," I said carefully. "I've done well. Let me look at the books, see what you need, and I'll make you a formal offer." "Clara, we're talking about serious money here. This isn't— Marcus, I'm asking you to let me try, please." Another pause. Then, "Fine, I'll send you everything. But don't get your hopes up. The number we need it's substantial." He sent me the financials that night. I didn't sleep. I went through every line, every statement, every vendor contract and loan document. It was worse than I thought, but not unsalvageable. Dad had been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul for years, keeping the restaurant afloat through sheer will and increasingly creative financing. But underneath the debt, the business itself was sound. Revenue was steady. Customer loyalty was strong. They just needed someone to restructure the debt, renegotiate terms, and inject enough capital to give them breathing room. I could do that. I'd done it for dozens of businesses. I spent 2 weeks building a proposal. Not as Clearwater Capital, I couldn't reveal that yet. As for myself, Clara Whitmore, private investor, offered $750,000 for a 25% stake in Whitmore's table. The offer included debt restructuring, operational consulting, and a clear path to profitability within 18 months. It was generous. More than generous. At that valuation, I was pricing the restaurant at $3 million, double what any appraiser would actually value it at. I was essentially giving them money while asking for a minority stake that gave them complete control. I sent it to Marcus on a Wednesday morning. I included a cover letter explaining that I'd built a successful career in business consulting and investment, that I'd worked with family businesses before, and that I wanted to help preserve Dad's legacy. I waited for the phone to ring. For the gratitude. For the relief in Marcus's voice. Instead, I got an email 3 days later. "Clara, Mom, Diane, and I discussed your offer. We appreciate the gesture, but we're going to pass. We've decided to explore other options. Thanks anyway." I read it 5 times, sitting at my kitchen island with my coffee going cold. "Thanks anyway." Like I'd offered to bring a side dish to dinner, I called him. He didn't answer. I called Diane. Voicemail. I called Mom. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the careful distance in her voice. "Mom, I got Marcus's email. I don't understand." "Did you read my proposal? I'm offering—" "We read it, Clara. It's not the right fit for us." "Not the right fit? Mom, I'm offering to save the restaurant. $750,000, and I'm only asking for a minority stake. You'd still control everything." "It's not about control, honey. It's about—" Well, Marcus explained it better than I can. He said the valuation doesn't make sense, and the terms are complicated, and we'd rather work with someone who understands the restaurant business. We hung up shortly after. I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon light faded, holding Dad's watch. and felt something calcify in my chest. They'd rather sell to strangers than accept my help. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, an expensive Bordeaux from a case I'd been saving, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The rejection. The dismissal. The casual cruelty of being thanked anyway like I was a stranger making a lowball offer on Craigslist. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Curiosity. Cold. Analytical curiosity. I opened my laptop and pulled up the corporate group's information. Coastal Dining Collective. I knew them. Regional chain, 37 locations, known for gutting family restaurants and turning them into branded concepts with assembly line kitchens and laminated menus. I pulled their financials. Public company, decent stock price, aggressive expansion strategy. They'd made offers on 4 other restaurants in Maine in the last year. Then I pulled Whitmore's table's complete financial picture. Not just what Marcus had sent me, but everything. Every loan, every investor, every line of credit, and there it was. The full picture of what I'd built. Anonymous Investor Group A. $1.8 million in equipment financing and renovation loans. Silent Partner LLC. $2.1 million in operational capital and expansion funding. Clearwater Holdings, one of my subsidiary companies. $1.3 million in emergency bridge loans over the past 18 months. Total, $5.2 million. I owned over 60% of their debt. I was their primary creditor. And they had no idea. When those loans were structured, I'd made sure they were non-voting debt positions. I didn't want control. I just wanted to help. But each loan had standard protective covenants, terms that gave the lender certain rights if the business was sold or underwent a major restructuring. I'd never planned to exercise those rights. Until now, I didn't make the decision that night. I'm not impulsive, never have been. That's probably why I've been successful. I think 3 moves ahead, consider all angles, sleep on big decisions. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Dad's watch on my nightstand, and ran through scenarios. If I did nothing, they'd sell to Coastal Dining Collective. The restaurant would become another branded location. Within 2 years, maybe less, everything that made it special would be gone. Dad's recipes would be optimized. The local fishermen Dad bought from would be replaced by corporate suppliers. The staff who'd worked there for decades would be phased out for cheaper labor, and my family would have their payout. Marcus would get his consultant fee for a few years. Diane would watch her menu get dismantled. Mom would have money but no purpose. They'd be comfortable and miserable. If I exercised my rights as primary creditor, I could block the sale. Force them to either accept my offer or find another buyer who'd have to assume my debt, which, given the terms I'd structured, would be nearly impossible. I could back them into a corner, but that felt like revenge. And I didn't want revenge. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. At 3 a.m, I got up and made tea. Chamomile, the kind Mom used to make when I was a kid and couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop one more time. I pulled up the loan documents. Read through every clause, every covenant, every protection I'd built in. I'd been so careful to structure these as helpful capital, not control mechanisms. But the language was there. Change of control provisions, sale approval rights, first right of refusal. I'd built a cage without realizing it. Or maybe I'd realized it all along and just never thought I'd have to use it. The sun was coming up when I finally made the call. Not to my family, not yet. To Richard Chen, my corporate attorney and one of the few people who knew the full scope of my involvement with Whitmore's table. Clara, he answered, voice rough with sleep. It's 5:30 a.m, I know. I need you to draft a formal notice of objection to the proposed sale of Whitmore's table to Coastal Dining Collective. Silence. Then, you're invoking the change of control provisions? Yes, all of them. All of them. Another pause. I could almost hear him thinking, weighing. Clara, you know what this means. They'll have to disclose all their creditors to complete any sale. Your involvement will come out. I know. They're going to feel ambushed, manipulated. I know that too. Are you sure you want to do this? I looked at Dad's watch, sitting on the table next to my tea. I remembered his hands, always moving, always working. Remembered the way he'd smell like garlic and Old Spice. I remembered the last time I saw him alive, at Diane's wedding 5 years ago, when he'd shaken my hand instead of hugging me because we'd become strangers who shared a last name. I'm sure, I said. Draft it today. Send it by the end of business. You're the client, Richard said. But Clara? For what it's worth. They're going to hate you for this. They already do, I said. At least this way I'll have earned it. The notice went out that Friday. Certified mail to Marcus, Diane, and Mom. Copies to their attorney and to Coastal Dining Collective's legal team. I didn't call to warn them. Didn't try to soften the blow. Just let the legal documents speak for themselves. The call came on Monday morning. Marcus. I almost didn't answer, but cowardice isn't my style. What the hell is this? He said without preamble. No hello. No pretense of civility. It's a formal objection to your proposed sale, I said calmly. As primary creditor, I have... Primary creditor? Clara, what are you talking about? We don't owe you anything. No, you owe Anonymous Investor Group A, Silent Partner LLC, and Clearwater Holdings, among others. Those entities have collectively provided over $5 million in capital to Whitmore's table over the past 5 years. I own those entities. The silence on the other end was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Marcus? You... His voice came out strangled. You've been what? Secretly financing us? Why? So you could control us? To help you. To keep the restaurant alive when you couldn't get traditional financing? Bullshit. You did this so you could play puppet master. So you could swoop in and be the hero and make us all look like idiots who can't run our own business. My jaw tightened. I did this because I love that restaurant and I love this family, even when you make it very difficult to do so. Don't, he hissed. Don't you dare talk about love. You left, Clara. You chose to leave. You don't get to pretend you're some kind of martyr watching over us from a distance. You're just a control freak who couldn't let go. I made you a legitimate offer, I said, keeping my voice level. $750,000 for a minority stake. You rejected it without even a phone call. Just thanks anyway, like I'd offered you pocket change. Because it was insulting. You're treating us like a charity case. Like we're too stupid to see that you're overpaying. Which means you want something other than money. I want the restaurant to survive as itself. Not as some corporate knockoff with Dad's name on a sign. And you get to decide that. You get to decide what's best for us. Someone has to, since you're about to make the worst decision of your lives. He laughed, sharp and bitter. There it is! You know better than all of us. You always have. The smart one who got away, looking down on the people who stayed and did the actual work. That landed like a punch. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Marcus, I said quietly, I have never looked down on you. Not once, not ever. Then why did you leave? Why did you abandon us when Dad needed you? I left because I was suffocating. Because every time I suggested a new idea or questioned how things were done, I was told this is how we've always done it. Because Dad made it very clear that my ideas weren't welcome unless they involved staying exactly where I was and doing exactly what he wanted. So you ran away. I built a life. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. His voice cracked slightly. You have no idea what it was like, Clara, being here every day. Watching Dad work himself to death. Watching Mom worry. Covering shifts when we were short-staffed. Dealing with broken equipment and demanding customers and all the 1,000 little fires that come with running a restaurant. You were off living your life while we were drowning. I was sending money, I said, and immediately regretted it. Anonymously. Through shell companies, like we were a tax write-off. I did it anonymously because I knew you wouldn't accept it otherwise. Because of exactly this assumption that help equals control or judgment or... I don't know, Marcus. I don't know what I did that made you all hate me so much. We don't hate you, he said, but there was no conviction in it. We just don't know you anymore. And now you show up with these legal documents and these loans we didn't know about and you expect us to? Be grateful? I expect you to think clearly about what you're about to do. Coastal dining will... Maybe what Dad built can't survive. Maybe it's time to let it go. You don't mean that. Don't tell me what I mean. His voice rose, sharp with frustration. You don't get to do that. You don't get to be gone for 20 years and then show up and tell me how to feel about my own father's restaurant. I closed my eyes, pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose. What do you want me to do, Marcus? Withdraw the objection? Let you sell? I want you to stay out of it. Sign whatever you need to sign to release your claim and let us make our own decisions. I can't do that. Can't or won't. Both. He exhaled, long and shaky. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. More distant. Fine, then I guess we'll see you in court. Our lawyer says we can challenge your standing, argue that the loans were made in bad faith, that you deliberately structured them to give yourself leverage. We'll tie this up for months. Years if we have to. Marcus, we're done here, Clara. You want a war? You've got one. He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, feeling hollowed out, in the silence of my kitchen, with the morning light streaming through the windows of my beautiful house that my family had never seen. I wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I didn't withdraw the objection. Over the next 3 weeks, things escalated in ways I hadn't anticipated. My involvement became public, not splashed across headlines, but known within the family and the small business community in their town. I started getting emails, some from distant relatives I barely remembered, asking why I was attacking my own family. Others from old family friends, confused and concerned. Diane sent me a text. I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you're hurting Mom. Is that what you want? I tried calling her. She didn't answer. Mom didn't reach out at all, which somehow hurt worse than Marcus's anger or Diane's disappointment. My lawyer kept me updated on the legal maneuvering. Marcus's attorney was indeed challenging my standing, arguing that the loans should be classified differently, that I'd misrepresented my involvement. It was noise, mostly. Richard assured me our documentation was airtight, but it was expensive, time-consuming noise. Meanwhile, Coastal Dining Collective put their offer on hold. They weren't interested in buying a business embroiled in litigation with complicated debt structures, which meant the restaurant was stuck in limbo, can't sell, can't move forward, slowly bleeding money while legal fees piled up on both sides. I'd meant to save them. Instead, I was helping to sink them. A month after that first phone call with Marcus, I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed. Clara, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's your mother. She doesn't have an appointment, but send her in, I said immediately, my heart suddenly hammering. Mom walked into my office slowly, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. She was smaller than I remembered, grayer. She wore a cardigan I recognized from 5 years ago and carried a purse Dad had bought her for their 40th anniversary. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly. I stood up, uncertain. Mom, I didn't know you were coming. I didn't tell anyone. Got on a plane this morning. She looked around again, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the framed degrees and awards on the walls. This is quite an office. I've done well. I can see that. She moved to the window, looked out at the city skyline. All these years I thought you were struggling. Thought you were too proud to ask for help. Marcus said you probably lived in some tiny apartment and ate ramen. We felt sorry for you. The words stung, but I just nodded. I'll let you think that. Why? I didn't have a simple answer. Because it was easier than explaining. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, I got the feeling you all thought I was bragging or showing off. Because Dad made it clear he was only interested in one kind of success. His kind. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face me. Your father was a difficult man, stubborn, set in his ways. But he loved you, Clara. He just didn't know how to show it after you left. He had 20 years to figure it out. So did you. That landed hard because it was true. I'd stayed away, told myself it was because they didn't want me there, but really I'd been protecting myself from the rejection, from the feeling of never being enough. Mom moved to one of the chairs facing my desk and sat down carefully, arranging her purse on her lap. Marcus told me about the loans. All of them. He had an accountant trace everything back. $5.2 million, Clara. Give or take. That's more money than I can really comprehend. It was necessary. The restaurant needed... I'm not here to argue about what the restaurant needed. She held up a hand and I fell silent. I'm here because I need to understand something. Why did you do it anonymously? Why not just help us openly? I sat down behind my desk, suddenly exhausted. Because you wouldn't have accepted it. Because every time I came home, every time I tried to be part of things, I was treated like an outsider who didn't understand the real work. Because I learned a long time ago that my money was more welcome than I was. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry. Mom never cried in front of people, but they were there, glistening. Oh, honey, is that really how you felt? It's how I still feel, I said quietly. I offered Marcus $750,000. He turned me down without even a conversation. Just, thanks anyway, like I'd offered to bring a casserole. He was embarrassed, Mom said, ashamed that his little sister had to rescue him. Men are like that, especially men like your brother who've spent their whole lives trying to fill shoes that were too big for them. Dad's shoes. Yes, your father cast a long shadow. Clara, Marcus has been trying to step out of it for 30 years and failing. Having you, the one who left, the one who rejected the restaurant, come in and save it, that was more than his pride could take. So I should have just let him sell to a corporation that'll gut everything Dad built? That's the better option? I didn't say that. She shifted in her chair, clutching her purse tighter. I'm not saying anyone's handled this well. Not you, not Marcus, not Diane. We're all wounded people poking at each other's bruises. I leaned back in my chair. So why are you here, Mom? Did Marcus send you to convince me to back down? Marcus doesn't know I'm here. He'd be furious if he did. She smiled slightly. I told him I was visiting my friend Margaret in Portland. I did visit Margaret. For about 40 minutes. Then I got back on a plane. So this is just you. Just me. She took a breath. I need to know what you want, Clara. I really want to. Because right now, everyone's in battle positions and nobody's talking about what actually matters. I want the restaurant to survive. As itself. Not as some corporate franchise. But why? You left it. You didn't want it then. Why does it matter so much now? The question sat between us, heavier than it should have been. I looked down at my hands. At the expensive manicure and the simple watch I wore, not Dad's watch, which I kept at home, but a sleek modern one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Because I was wrong, I said finally. Because I spent 20 years telling myself I didn't need that place or that family or those memories, and then Dad died, and I realized I'd been lying to myself the whole time. I do need it. I need to know it still exists, even if I'm not part of it. I need to know that somewhere in the world, people are still eating Dad's cioppino and sitting at those tables and looking out at the water. I need there to be something I didn't destroy by leaving. Mom's face softened. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't destroy anything, didn't I? Look at us. Look at this family. We can barely speak to each other without drawing blood. That's not because you left. That's because we're Whitmores, and we're all too stubborn and too proud and too scared to admit when we're hurting. She leaned forward. Your father loved that restaurant, but you want to know what he said to me 2 weeks before he died? He said, I wish I'd spent less time worrying about the business and more time knowing my daughter. He had your picture on his desk, Clara, the one from your college graduation. He'd look at it and sigh, and I knew he was thinking about all the conversations you two never had. My throat tightened. He never called, never visited. I always thought he thought you didn't want him to. Thought you'd built this new life and he'd just be in the way. He was proud of you, baby, so proud. He just didn't know how to say it. I pressed my hands flat against my desk, trying to steady myself. Then why didn't he leave me part of the restaurant? Why just the watch? Because he knew you didn't want it. At least he thought you didn't want it. And the watch, she smiled sadly. He wore that watch every day. It was the one thing that was always with him. Leaving it to you was his way of saying you were always with him too. I couldn't stop the tears then. They just came, hot and fast, and I didn't try to hide them. Mom got up and came around the desk and pulled me into a hug, and I let myself be held like I was 10 years old again, crying over a scraped knee. "I don't know how to fix this," I whispered into her shoulder. "Neither do I," she admitted. "But I know we can't fix it with lawyers and legal documents and power plays. That's just making it worse." She pulled back, kept her hands on my shoulders. "I need you to do something for me, Clara. Something hard." "What?" "Come home. Not for a day or a weekend. Really come home. For a month, maybe 2. I work in a restaurant. Be there every day. Let Marcus and Diane see who you've become. Let them know you. And you get to know them, not as the siblings who stayed, but as the people they are now. Mom, I have a company to run. I can't just... You're the CEO. You can do whatever you want. And if you can't, then what was the point of all this success?" She squeezed my shoulders. "You want to save the restaurant? This is how. Not with money. With presence. With showing up. With doing the work alongside them until they remember that you're not just the sister who left. You're also the sister who loved that place enough to pour $5 million into keeping it alive. They'll hate having me there. Probably at first. But they'll get over it. And Clara?" She smiled. "You might actually enjoy it. You might remember why you loved it in the first place, before everything got so complicated." I wiped my eyes, tried to pull myself together. "And what about the legal situation? The blocked sale? That's between you and your conscience. But I'd suggest this. Tell them you'll withdraw your objection on one condition. That they give you 3 months before making any final decisions. 3 months of you working there. All of you together, trying to actually fix things instead of just arguing about who gets to give up. Marcus will never agree to that. Then make him agree. You're good at negotiating, aren't you? This is just another negotiation. Except this time, what you're negotiating for is your family." Mom left that afternoon. I walked her to the elevator, hugged her goodbye, and watched the doors close on her knowing smile. Then I went back to my office and stared at my computer screen for an hour without seeing it. 3 months. 3 months of going home, working in the restaurant, facing Marcus's resentment and Diane's, distance and all the ghosts I'd spent 2 decades outrunning. Sounded like torture. It also sounded like the only real option I had left. I called Richard that evening. "Draft a new proposal. I'll withdraw all objections to any sale or restructuring on the condition that no final decisions are made for 90 days. During that time, I work at the restaurant in whatever capacity they need. At the end of 90 days, they're free to do whatever they want with my full cooperation. And if they refuse the condition, then we proceed with litigation and everyone loses. But frame it as an olive branch, not an ultimatum. Clara, you realize this puts you in a very vulnerable position? You're giving up your leverage." "I know. And you're okay with that?" I thought about Dad's watch. About 20 years of anonymous loans and unanswered phone calls and a family that had become strangers. About Mom's words. "You want to save the restaurant?" "This is how. I'm okay with that," I said. The proposal went out the next day. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then another week. I started to think they were just going to ignore it, let the legal process play out, and I'd have my answer in the form of silence. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. "Diane." "Hey," she said, and her voice was careful, neutral. "We got your proposal." "And?" "And Marcus thinks it's a trap. He thinks you're trying to worm your way in so you can take over. What do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. I think I don't know what to think. This whole thing is insane, Clara. $5 million? All those loans? You've been like a guardian angel we didn't know we had, except now the angel is threatening to sue us. I'm not threatening to sue anyone. I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake. By forcing us to spend 3 months with you? By asking for a chance to be part of this family again. Or maybe for the first time I don't know anymore. Another pause. I heard noise in the background. The restaurant. Lunch service, probably. The sound of it made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. Mom told us about your conversation. Diane said finally. About what you said. About needing to know if the restaurant still exists. She wasn't supposed to. I'm glad she did. Because it's the first honest thing anyone in this family has said in years. She took a breath. Look, I'm not speaking for Marcus, but personally, I miss you. I miss having a sister. I'm tired of this Cold War where we all pretend we're fine and nobody says what they really mean. My eyes stung. I miss you too. So here's the deal. I'll talk to Marcus. I'll convince him to agree to your 90 days. But Clara, you have to actually show up. Not as the rich sister who's slumming it. Not as the business expert here to fix us. Just as Clara. As someone who's willing to roll up her sleeves and remember what it means to work in a kitchen. I can do that. Can you? Because this isn't a boardroom. There's no assistant to handle the grunt work. You'll be prepping vegetables and scrubbing floors and dealing with customers who send food back and vendors who show up late. It's not glamorous. I know what it is, Diane. I grew up doing it. That was 23 years ago. People change. Then I guess you'll find out if I have. She laughed, just a little. I guess we will. Give me a few days to work on Marcus. I'll call you. She did call 4 days later. Marcus had agreed, but barely. The terms were clear. 90 days, starting immediately. I'd work full-time at the restaurant in whatever capacity they needed. In exchange, they'd put the coastal dining sale on hold and give me a real chance to help restructure the business. At the end of 90 days, they'd make their final decision, and I'd honor it no matter what. I packed 2 suitcases, put my company in the hands of my very capable executive team, and got on a plane to Maine. Marcus picked me up at the airport. The drive to the restaurant was silent except for the radio, some classic rock station Dad used to listen to. He didn't ask about my flight. Didn't make small talk. Just drove with his jaw set and his hands tight on the wheel. When we pulled up to Whitmore's table, I felt something shift in my chest. It looked the same. Blue shutters, white clapboard siding, the hand-painted sign Dad had commissioned 30 years ago. Through the windows, I could see customers at tables, the warm glow of the dining room, the organized chaos of a restaurant in full swing. We're short on prep cooks, Marcus said without looking at me. You'll start in the kitchen. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. I won't be. He finally turned to face me. His eyes were Dad's eyes. Same deep brown, same way of looking through you instead of at you. I don't know what you think is going to happen here, Clara. But if you're expecting some heartwarming reunion where we all realize how much we missed each other, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not expecting anything, I said honestly, except hard work and maybe if I'm lucky, a chance to know my family again. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. We'll see. I got out of the car and stood in the parking lot, suitcases at my feet, looking at the restaurant my father had built and my anonymous millions had sustained. The late afternoon sun hit the water behind the building, turning it gold and orange, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I might actually be home. The first week was brutal. I'd forgotten how physically demanding restaurant work was. The long hours on your feet, the heat of the kitchen, the precision required when you're moving fast. My hands, used to keyboards and conference handshakes, blistered from knife work. My back ached from leaning over prep stations. I went to bed each night in the small apartment I'd rented near the restaurant and slept like the dead. Marcus barely spoke to me. He'd give orders, dice those onions, clean the walk-in, prep the fish, and I'd do them. No arguments, no suggestions, just work. I could feel him watching me, waiting for me to complain or quit or prove that I was exactly who he thought I was. The sister who thought she was too good for this life. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Diane was warmer, but cautious. She'd check my prep work, correct my technique when I was rusty, occasionally smile when I got something right. But we didn't talk about anything real, just work. Just the immediate tasks that needed doing. The staff didn't know who I was at first. Just the new prep cook, the one Marcus had hired. They treated me like anyone else, which meant mostly ignoring me unless they needed something. I was fine with that. I didn't want special treatment. I just wanted to prove I could do the work. It was in the third week that things started to shift. Small things, barely noticeable. I was prepping vegetables for the evening service when one of the line cooks, Tommy, who'd worked there for 15 years, sliced his hand open on a mandolin. Not terribly, but enough that he needed stitches and couldn't work his station. Marcus swore under his breath, already calculating how to cover the gap. Without thinking, I said, "I can take it." He looked at me like I'd suggested I could fly. "You haven't worked a line in 2 decades. I know the menu. I've been watching. Let me try." "This isn't playing around, Clara. We have 80 reservations tonight and then you don't have time to argue with me. Either let me try or figure out another solution, but decide now because service starts in 20 minutes. Diane, who'd been watching from the past, said quietly, "Let her try." "Marcus!" He looked between us, jaw working. Then he jerked his head toward Tommy's station. "Fine, but if you go down, we're all going down with you." I didn't go down. I was slower than Tommy. My plating wasn't as pretty, and I definitely felt every second of the 3-hour dinner rush. But I kept up. I didn't send out anything that wasn't right. And when the last order went out and Marcus called clear, I leaned against the counter and felt something I hadn't felt in years, the bone-deep satisfaction of working a station successfully. Marcus walked by, paused and said without looking at me, "Not bad. It wasn't much." But it was something. After that, I wasn't just the prep cook. I filled in where needed. I worked the line when they were short. I even took a few shifts hosting when their regular host called in sick. I learned the rhythms of the place again. The way Saturdays were insane and Tuesdays were quiet. The regulars who came every week and ordered the same thing. The tourists who asked 1,000 questions about the menu. I also started to see the problems. The ones you couldn't see from spreadsheets and financial statements. The walk-in cooler was running inefficiently, costing them hundreds in spoilage every month. The POS system was outdated, slowing down service. They were ordering from multiple vendors when they could consolidate and save. The schedule was a mess, with people working overtime when better planning could have prevented it. I bit my tongue for 5 weeks. Watched, learned, didn't say anything. But in week 6, during a particularly brutal Saturday night when everything seemed to go wrong at once, a vendor delivered the wrong fish. The dishwasher broke mid-service and 2 servers called out sick. I found Marcus in Dad's old office at midnight, head in his hands, surrounded by invoices. I knocked on the doorframe. He looked up, exhausted. "What?" "I know I'm not supposed to offer advice. I know that's not why I'm here. But Marcus, I need to show you something. Clara, I don't have time for 5 minutes, please." He sighed but gestured for me to come in. I sat across from him, the same desk Dad had sat at, the same lamp that still flickered, and pulled out my phone. I'd been keeping notes, building a spreadsheet on my own time. You're spending about 30% more than you need to on supplies because you're using 5 different vendors. If you consolidate to 2, these 2 specifically, you get volume discounts and better service. That alone saves you around $4,000 a month. I could see him wanting to argue, but he looked at the numbers, said nothing. Your scheduling is costing you overtime you don't need. If you restructure the shifts like this, showed him another sheet, you maintain coverage but cut labor. Costs by about 15%. We've always done the schedule this way, he said automatically. I know, but that doesn't mean it's the best way. He stared at the numbers for a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and something in his expression had softened. You've been working on this? In my spare time. I can't help it. I see inefficiencies in my brain I want to fix them. Even when we don't want your help. Especially then, apparently. I smiled slightly. Look, you don't have to use any of this. I thought maybe it would help. He was quiet, scrolling through the spreadsheet on my phone. Then he handed it back to me and leaned back in his chair. Dad used to say you had the best head for business he'd ever seen. Said you could look at a problem and find solutions he'd never thought of. He was proud of that, you know. Even if he never told you. My throat tightened. Mom said something similar. Yeah, well, Mom's smarter than the rest of us. He rubbed his face. I've been doing this for 20 years, Clara. Every day, trying to keep this place alive, trying to live up to what Dad built. And I'm failing. We're bleeding money. I don't sleep. I snap at Diane. I can barely pay the staff what they deserve. And then you show up with your $5 million and your fancy proposals, and it made me feel like everything I've done wasn't enough. Marcus, let me finish. He held up a hand. I know that's not fair. I know you were trying to help. But it's hard, you know? Being the one who stayed, being the one everyone expects to have all the answers, and then finding out my little sister has been secretly keeping us afloat this whole time, that's a tough pill to swallow. I never meant to make you feel inadequate. You're not failing. You've kept this place running through impossible circumstances. Do you know how rare that is? Most restaurants don't make it 5 years, and you've kept this one going for 2 decades while dealing with Dad's debt and an industry that eats people alive. That's not failure, Marcus. That's a miracle. He looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time since I'd come home. You really believe that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. He nodded slowly, then gestured to my phone. Send me that spreadsheet. Let me look it over, talk to Diane. Maybe there's something there we can use. Okay. I stood to leave, but he said, Clara? I turned back. Thanks. For coming back? For not giving up on us. I couldn't speak. Just nodded and left before he could see me cry. After that, things changed. Not overnight, nothing ever does in real life, but gradually. Marcus started asking my opinion on things. Small things at first. Should we keep this dish on the menu? What do I think about changing suppliers? Then bigger things. Restructuring, long-term planning, marketing strategy. Diane and I started having coffee together in the mornings before service. Not talking about anything heavy, just being sisters again. She told me about her life, her marriage to a man I'd never met, her dreams of maybe opening her own place someday. I told her about my business, what it was like building something from nothing, the loneliness that came with success. Do you ever regret it? She asked one morning. Leaving? Building this whole other life? I thought about it. I regret how I left. I regret the distance. But the leaving itself? No. I needed to become who I am. I just wish I'd figured out how to do that without losing all of you. You didn't lose us, she said. We're right here. We've always been here. The 90 days came faster than I expected. One morning I woke up and realized it was day 89, and tomorrow we'd have to make a decision. Marcus called a family meeting that night after service. Just the 4 of us, him, Diane, Mom, and me, sitting at a table in the empty dining room with the lights dimmed and the ocean visible through the windows. Dark and endless. So, Marcus said, hands folded on the table, tomorrow's the day. We need to decide what we're doing with the restaurant. Diane looked at me. What do you think we should do? I'd been preparing for this question for weeks, rehearsing answers, building arguments. But sitting there with them, I realized none of it mattered. This wasn't my decision to make. I think, I said carefully, that you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. If that means selling to Coastal Dining and taking the payout, I'll support it. If it means trying to restructure and keep fighting, I'll help however I can. But it has to be what you want, not what I want. That's a cop-out, Marcus said, but there was no heat in it. You've spent 3 months here. You've seen everything. You have opinions. I know you do. Fine. Do you want my opinion? I took a breath. I think this place is worth saving. Not because of Dad or legacy or any of that emotional stuff, though that matters too. But because it's actually a good business being run inefficiently. The bones are solid. The customer base is loyal. The location is prime. You're not failing because the concept is bad. You're struggling because you're trying to do everything the way it's always been done, even when better options exist. So we should modernize, Diane said. Lose what makes us special. No, you should modernize the operations while keeping what makes you special. Update your systems, streamline your costs, maybe expand your revenue streams, catering, private events, a retail line of Dad's sauces. Keep the soul, change the structure. Marcus leaned back. And how do we pay for all that? Because we're still in debt up to our eyeballs, in case you forgot. You restructure the debt. Convert my loans into equity. I become an actual partner instead of a silent creditor. We bring in some additional capital through traditional channels now that we have a solid plan. And we do it together, as a family, with clear roles and responsibilities and nobody trying to do everything alone. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. Mom, who'd been quiet this whole time, spoke up. Your father built this restaurant because he wanted to create something that mattered. Something that brought people together, fed them, made them happy. But he also built it alone, and that isolation killed him. If you three can figure out how to run this place together, really together, not just coexisting, then maybe you'll succeed where he couldn't. Diane reached across the table and took my hand. Then she reached for Marcus with her other hand. After a moment, he took it. Then he reached for mine, completing the circle. I don't want to sell, Diane said quietly. I want to fight, but I can't do it the way we've been doing it. Something has to change. Marcus looked at me. If we do this, if we really do this, I need to know you're all in. Not just financially. I need to know you're going to be here. Part of this, not just sending money from across the country. I can't be here full time, I said honestly. I have a company to run. But I can be here 1 week a month. And I can be available whenever you need me. Phone calls, video meetings, flying in for emergencies. This would be my priority, Marcus. Right up there with everything else I've built. 1 week a month, he repeated, testing the words. Then he nodded. Okay, I can work with that. So we're doing this? Diane asked, looking between us. Are we really keeping it? We're really keeping it, Marcus confirmed. Then he looked at me. Partners. I thought about Dad's watch sitting in my apartment. About 20 years of distance and $5 million in secret support and 3 months of peeling potatoes and working the line. About how broken we'd all been and how maybe, just maybe, we were starting to heal. Partners, I agreed. We spent the next 6 months restructuring everything. I converted my loans to a 35% equity stake, making me the largest single shareholder, but leaving Marcus and Diane with control. We brought in a management consultant I trusted to help streamline operations. We updated systems, renegotiated vendor contracts, restructured the menu to improve margins without sacrificing quality. It wasn't easy. We fought, we disagreed. Marcus and I had a spectacular argument about staffing levels that ended with both of us not speaking for 3 days until Diane locked us in the walk-in and said we couldn't come out until we worked it out. But we did work it out. Every time. Because we'd all decided that this mattered more than our egos. By month 8, we were profitable for the first time in 5 years. By month 12, we'd paid down a third of the debt. We launched a catering service that took off faster than any of us expected. Diane developed a line of sauces and marinades that we sold retail, both in the restaurant and online, and I kept my promise. 1 week a month I was there, working the line, reviewing numbers, sitting in on menu planning sessions. The rest of the time I ran my company from wherever I was, but Whitmore's table was always in the back of my mind. Mom came by every day, just like she had when Dad was alive. But now she was smiling more, lighter. She'd sit at table 7, Dad's favorite table, and watch us work. And sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this expression of quiet pride that made my chest ache in the best way. 2 years after I came home, we had a party to celebrate the restaurant's 45th anniversary. The place was packed. Staff past and present, regular customers, family friends, people Dad had known for decades. Marcus gave a speech thanking everyone for their support. Diane talked about Dad's recipes and legacy. Then Marcus surprised me by calling me up to say a few words. I stood there in front of all those people, this community I'd left and somehow found my way back to, and I didn't know what to say. So I just told the truth. My father and I didn't always understand each other. I left this place because I thought I needed to become someone different, somewhere else. And maybe I did. But what I learned after 20 years away is that you can't outrun where you come from. It's part of you whether you're here or not. So thank you for welcoming me back. Thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this again. And thank you for reminding me that family isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up day after day and do the work together. The applause was warm, genuine. But what mattered most was Marcus catching my eye from across the room and nodding. Just once. But it was enough. Later that night, after everyone had left and we were cleaning up, Diane found me in the kitchen wiping down stations. "Hey," she said, "I never thanked you. For $5 million. For fighting for this place when we were too stupid to see it was worth fighting for. You don't have to thank me. This place, it's part of me. Even when I pretended it wasn't, I know. But still, thank you." She hugged me and I hugged her back. And we stood there in Dad's kitchen, our kitchen now. And I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't even known was unsettled. I still run Clearwater Capital. I'm still successful, still building businesses, still living my life across the country. But 1 week a month I come home. I put on an apron. I work alongside my family. And I remember that success isn't just what you build for yourself. It's what you protect for the people you love. The restaurant is thriving now. We're planning a second location, maybe a third. Marcus is talking about writing a cookbook. Diane is teaching cooking classes on weekends. And me, I'm the partner who swooped in with a $750 million offer they rejected, only to discover I'd already invested $5 million they never knew about. They call me their guardian angel. Their secret weapon, their sister who came home. I call it the best investment I ever made. Sometimes the thing you're trying to save isn't just a building or a business. Sometimes it's a connection, a belonging, a piece of yourself you left behind and spent years pretending you didn't need. My family rejected my offer because they couldn't see past their pride and their pain. They didn't know I was already their biggest investor, their silent partner, the invisible thread holding everything together. But rejection isn't always the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a harder, more honest conversation. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what was worth fighting for in the first place. Would you have done what I did? Would you have fought for something that didn't seem to want you? Or would you have walked away and let it go? I'd love to hear your story.